Hey, what's up guys? It's Lucas and you're watching Fine Tuning. So as you can see here, I've got my little 2-space rack, and this has two things in it. It's got a Furman power conditioner and what we're talking about today, which is the Palmer MACHT 402 guitar power amp. So this is a true stereo solid state guitar power amp. So a power amp is kind of a hard thing to do a demo of, so what I'm going to try to do is just explain how I use it and what I like about it. But first, let's kind of touch a little bit on the features and what you might use it for. First and foremost, I think for me it is for modelers, amp modelers. Like for instance, what I have on the floor here is my Line 6 Helix, which I absolutely love. You could use a Helix the way that I have many times before, which would be kind of running it directly into front of house, and then you use it through your monitors, or if you like, I have some Headrush kind of full range flat response monitors that are basically just powered PA monitors. You can use it like that, and that works just fine. But I've noticed that if you play in a band with another guitar player, and that guitar player is using like a tube amp or a solid state amp or whatever in a cabinet, and you're not using a cabinet, it kind of changes the way the dynamic of the stage thing works, and not in a way that I think is good. So for me, if I'm playing with another guitar player who's using a modeler and they're going direct in, then that's what I'll do as well. But if I'm playing with another guitar player and they're using an amp and a cabinet, then I want to still be able to use my modeler, but also have a cabinet on stage so I can get that feel to kind of sit in the stage mix with the band. And so that's where this comes in. Alright, so first of all, let's go over some features. So this is a true stereo power amp, which is to say that it actually has two separate power amps built into it. And you can use them independently if you want to run a stereo rig like I do, or you can also bridge them and use them as one power amp, but I'm using it as a stereo power amp. So what you have are two identical channels, A and B. These are exactly the same, and you can just control them individually. So each channel has got a volume control, a low control, a high control, and then a rumble filter. So of course volume control is very self-explanatory. It's just how much output you're getting out of a power amp. And then the low and high controls are really great because you can set up a sound that you think sounds really good, like in your room or in the band practice space or whatever, and get it dialed in sounding great. And then if you go to a certain stage, you might think all of a sudden like, wow, this cabinet sounds really bright, or it's really boomy, or it doesn't have enough bass or whatever. And so these are specially tailored controls to kind of just let you shape the way the cabinet sounds in the room. They don't drastically affect the tone, other than I would think of it more like like a low and high cut or boost, just on the very top and the very bottom. Now the rumble filters, those are kind of like a high pass filter, and I think it shelves somewhere in the maybe like 40 hertz area, so the really, really low kind of like rumble that you might get from certain big cabinets or being on a stage that's particularly acoustically resonant in the bass. And so that's just a push-in button, so if you feel like your cabinet or your sound is just like overwhelmingly boomy, then you can click in that rumble filter, and that'll just kind of cut out some of that really, really low information, which is really handy. So there's about a million different ways you could hook up this power amp with all kinds of different rigs and cabinets and speakers and stuff to do different things, and it would be kind of a fool's errand for me to try and cover all of the different things that you could do with it. So instead what I'm going to do is tell you how I use it. So what I have on the floor is my Line 6 Helix, which is one of my all-time favorite tone generators. And I have it run into this power amp, of course in the back, you can't see it, via two 1/4-inch cables going into channels A and B. So A is the left channel and B is the right channel for me. And then what I'm doing inside of the Helix is basically, I'm not doing anything stereo other than some delay, reverb, and chorus, that kind of stuff. So if I don't have any of those effects on, it would be operating as a mono sound. It's only when I use an effect or something that you start to get a little bit of that stereo spread happening. And that's because I'm using a 212 cabinet. And so I'll throw up a picture of this on the screen of the 212 cabinet, but it's just a Seismic Audio 212 that I bought unloaded off Amazon. I will leave a link in the description. It's very inexpensive. And I put two EV12L speakers in it because I really like those speakers. And so those speakers are so close together that if I used anything like really stereo, it would be kind of lost. But stereo delay, stereo reverb, stereo chorus, that kind of stuff you can get away with in a 212. So I have two 1/4-inch cables going into the power amp. You could also use XLRs if you want, but I'm using 1/4-inch. And then coming out of this, I have two speak-on cables. They're speak-on the end that connects to the power amp, and then regular 1/4-inch speaker cables on the other end going into my 212 because I have that wired true stereo where it's basically just two separate jacks, one for each speaker. So as you can see, I just have the 212 cabinet mic'd up with a couple SM57s. So in a live situation, that's how I would go about doing it, and hopefully the sound guy would spread those two microphones hard left and right so that the audience would get the full stereo delay chorus effect. Okay, so now that I've kind of explained how I'm using this, what I'm going to do is grab one of my guitars, I'm going to plug in and just kind of demonstrate some of the different sounds that I get out of this. And then after that, we'll kind of play with the EQ controls a little bit, and you can hear how that works. All right, so I've got my favorite guitar here. This is my PRS DGT with my signature Planet Tone pickups in it. I'll leave a link to those in the description as well. And so I'm going to click it on. You will hear that there's some background noise coming from the cabinet, kind of just like ambient, a little bit of hum. And that is because I have this up like at gigging volume right now, so it's very loud. Okay, so here's my clean tone that I used live, and this is just the complete dry clean tone with just a tiny little bit of reverb. I have two different reverbs, one on the left and one on the right, but they're very subtle. So there is a little bit of a stereo effect happening here, but it's not much. Okay, so here's where the stereo effect starts to come into play. So if I turn on my delay, what I have is two separate tape delays, or models of tape delays. And I have one set to be a quarter note repeat and one set to be a dotted eighth note repeat, and I have those panned hard left and right. So if I just hit a little chuck here, you'll hear it bounce back and forth. So I can take that a step further even and add some stereo chorusing, and that sounds like this. So here's a crunchy drive sound, once again, just with a little bit of reverb. It is a stereo reverb, but it's very subtle. But if I want to kind of thicken that sound up a little bit and just add like a little texture to it for certain parts, then I might step on the stereo chorus and get this. So here's my kind of like heavier tone that I would use. It's basically the same thing we just had before, but just a little bit more gain. And then as I'm playing, I'll kick on my stereo delay, and you can hear it kind of like widen and fill out. So for me, a great lead sound almost always has like some kind of delay involved, and I really in particular like the stereo delay thing where it kind of ping-pongs back and forth. So here's my lead sound, which is just the same thing we just had, but with a little overdrive in front and then that stereo delay, and that sounds like this. Okay, so now we pop back over to my clean sound, and I'm going to kind of cut all the stereo stuff off except for that little subtle reverb. And what I'm going to do is kind of show you what the EQ controls do. So first let's start with the rumble filters. So I'm going to play, and then I'm going to turn the rumble filters on. It's a really subtle thing, particularly through the microphone, but in the room you'll be able to feel that there's like a noticeable, that kind of boomy, really low stuff kind of gets tucked up, which is really nice for certain stages. So here's without it, and then I'll click it on. I really like how the rumble filter just kind of tightens the whole sound up a lot. So in general, I have that pushed in. I'm gonna go ahead and pop those back out just so that they're not interfering here. And now let's try the low control. So I'll play again, and then I'll start rolling in those low controls. Obviously, I have to do it to both channels because I have the same sound more or less on both sides. So let's try that. So hopefully that's coming through the microphones, what a big difference that's making. Especially in the room, it's very noticeable. It's almost like shrinking the size of the cabinet a little bit is what it feels like. So that's really handy if you're switching between different cabinets and you need to kind of adjust your preset per cabinet that you're using. But it's also really handy just in the sense of like if you're going to play at home and you're going to turn down really low, then you might want to add in a little bit more bass that you wouldn't normally need because you're playing softly. Something like that. So now we'll do the same thing with the high control, and you can hear what it does. So those controls are really handy because they're basically just like high and low pass filters, and it just kind of lets you tailor if you have a sound that you really like through one cabinet, but then you got to move to another cabinet, or you need to adjust for the stage or room that you're in. It kind of just lets you fine-tune, tailor it in a little bit so that it sounds good wherever you are and whatever cabinet you're using. It's really, really handy. In fact, I've in band practice used that a lot because you never know, you dial in a sound by yourself in the room and it sounds great, but then you get in and you're playing with a bass player and you're like, whoa, I've got way too much bass, I'm getting in the way of the bass player. So then you can use that low control to just kind of suck some of it out, which is awesome. So anyway, let's just hear some more tones. So I can say from experience, I have thoroughly tested this power amp through lots and lots of like jam sessions and practices and stuff like that. I haven't been able to take this live because by the time I got it all integrated into my rig, like we couldn't play live anymore, like because of the Rona. But I'm looking forward to taking this out and playing on stage with it because it works so well, and it allows me to still have all the stuff that I like from my modeler, all the versatility and the ease of switching and stuff, but also still have the cabinet on the stage so it feels like I'm playing through a real amp. It's just fantastic. So extremely good value as well. So anyway, go check one of these out. I'll leave a link in the description, and until next time, I will catch you later.